Welcome to Hope is Here. My name is Greg Horn. We are looking at People Smarts 101. If you missed yesterday's program, you're thinking, why are you doing People Smarts? Well, as I shared yesterday, friends, unfortunately, I see a lot of followers of Jesus that are lacking in just some basic people skills. And the reason it's kind of a burden on my heart is because when you don't have good people skills, okay, then it impacts on how people perceive you being a follower of Jesus. And it makes those that are not followers of Jesus have no interest in being a follower of Jesus. And they don't want to hear about Jesus, or they don't want to accept an invitation to the event at your church. And man, I've just seen it over and over in my 25 years of doing ministry. And it just breaks my heart because before people want to hear about Jesus, they want to see Jesus. And it just involves having just basic people smarts and good people skills. And so we're just kind of doing a little summer school class here, Wednesday and Thursday, People Smarts 101. And yesterday we talked about just the important value of listening, like really listening, and gave some practical steps and some skills and things that you could implement in your life to be a good listener. And we talked about James chapter 1, verse 19, to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. So if you missed yesterday's 14-minute program, really want to encourage you to go to our website, hopeisheretoday.org. That's hopeisheretoday.org. Also remind you we have a YouTube channel. It's simply Hope is Here, and my name, Greg Horn, Horn. Hope you'll subscribe to that and maybe share it with somebody else. Also, we're on all the platforms that host podcasts, so I hope you'll subscribe there. If you've been blessed by a program, please share it with our comment on the podcast or the YouTube channel. It greatly encourages our Hope is Here staff and our financial ministry partners. All right. Well, today, we looked at listening yesterday. Today, I want us to look at responding instead of reacting. Oh, responding instead of reacting. You know, man, you work in the workplace, man, it's just full of pressure, deadlines, emails, disagreement, stress. And those moments, it's easy to react emotionally. And friends, that can be true in the church world, in the nonprofit world. You know, maybe you work at a church, or you volunteer at your church, you're a servant leader at your church. And, you know, sometimes things get stressful and people are human and they react emotionally. But emotionally reactive decisions often create bigger problems later. Amen? I mean, let's be honest. You know, when we react emotionally, these reactive decisions often create bigger problems later. And I did it one time. It's been, over, I think, a decade ago now. And, it has. Wow. A lot longer. Hard to believe, but Dan, I reacted emotionally in a situation that was so frustrating, and that's part of why I want to share this, because I learned from that then, have implemented it, and helped a lot of other people over the years. But psychologist Daniel Goleman, who has written a couple books on EQ, which is emotional intelligence. EQ is your emotional quotient, okay? He wrote in one of the books, if your emotional abilities aren't in hand, no matter how smart you are, you're not going to get very far. And friends, that's true if you're in the workplace, but it's true in just relationships with family and personal life, socially, at the church. It's just really, really true about that, you know, you got to have, if you're going to have people smarts, it does require emotional awareness. And, let's take a look now at the space between stimulus and response, okay? We got things that stimulus and then how we respond to them. Viktor Frankl, who is a Holocaust survivor and then became a psychologist, wrote something powerful when he said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. Goes back to that James chapter 1, verse 19. I know I sound like a broken record, but be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. But friends, when we take that space to choose our response, especially when something's really frustrating to us or even maybe angers us, man, that space is the key to people smarts. Because, reacting happens instantly, but responding requires a moment of thought. Say that again. Reacting happens instantly, but responding requires a moment of thought. Give you an example, we've all maybe received an email or a text that just kind of seems critical or unfair. And man, reaction says, I want to fire back a defensive response. And you type it up and email it or text it right away. And 10 minutes later, you're like, man, after you've cooled down, I wish I regret doing that. But instead of reacting, if you look at it with a response, you pause, you breathe, okay? Take some deep breaths, you ask a question, and then you clarify intent, and then the outcome is completely different with this person you're communicating with through a text or an email. I like this. I've heard some people talk about, a 10-minute rule. One leadership coach teaches this simple rule: never send an emotional email or text immediately. Say it again. Never send an emotional email or text immediately. Wait 10 minutes. Okay? Reread it. Edit it. Just look for words. I was sending something the other day out of frustration, and I put an exclamation point after one of the sentences, and it wasn't a real long response, probably about 5-6 sentences, but that was the first sentence. I thought, man, that sets the tone when I put an exclamation point. So thankfully I was able to go back and edit it. Because, it just, tone says everything. Used to have a friend that when I would start to get worked up about something, and, I think every time it was actually legitimate, but they would just say to me, breathe, Greg, breathe. And that kind of goes back to that James chapter 1, verse 19. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And, if we'll take that 10-minute, Dick Vitale used to say it when a basketball team was on the road and, the home team goes on a 10-0 run, the crowd's going nuts. He'd go, Coach so-and-so, you need a TO, baby. You need to get a timeout and calm your team down. And, it's the same thing. When somebody you just get overwhelmed or get really worked up or upset over a text or email, it's good to get a TO. In fact, I had a buddy of mine, Mark White, who was coaching me up 20 years ago when I would start to feel some emotions, frustrations, and things coming up because of the unexpected divorce and the bankruptcy because of the flood and losing my business and home and marriage unexpectedly, all in a 24-hour period. And he said, sometimes you feel all those overwhelming emotions and you want to react. He said, you were a former college basketball coach at Western Kentucky University. Just signal yourself a timeout. He goes, what do? They need a timeout, a 30-second. I said, well, they take each hand and they place it on their shoulders. That means they just need a short timeout. He said, so I just want to encourage you to physically do that. That helps trigger your mind to realize, okay, I need to step back. I need to breathe. I need to inhale 5 seconds, hold it, then exhale for 5 seconds. And I've read to do that 5 times. It's amazing how that helps slow your heartbeat down and then your response before you type something out or email it. I like this one illustration I've heard called the elevator moment. It says, a young professional once told a mentor about a conflict with a coworker. The mentor asked, where were you when the conversation happened? He said, I was in the hallway. The mentor replied, next time, imagine pressing the elevator button before answering. Wait for the elevator to arrive before you respond. He said that small pause will change everything. So let's look at some ways on how to respond instead of react. Just give you 3 quick, easy practices, but very, very effective, friends. Number 1, pause. Pause. Take a breath before answering. You've heard me talk about that. It sounds simple, but friends, it prevents many bad decisions. And if it's something that really, really gets under my skin, I've learned to take 4 or 5 deep breaths. And then it just helps me kind of calm down and process whatever it is, no matter how crazy I might think it is, or how offensive I might think it is, or how unwise I may think it is. A second way to respond instead of reacting is to seek understanding from the other side, the person sending the text or the email. You can ask them to say, help me understand what you really mean here. Because sometimes, friends, we need to get clarity on it, because sometimes we misunderstand. And here's what I've learned, okay? Clarity prevents unnecessary conflict. Can I get a witness on that? Clarity prevents unnecessary conflict. Then the third thing on how to respond instead of reacting is to focus on solutions. Focus on solutions. Instead of saying, all right, whose fault was this? Who did this? What knucklehead did this? Ask simply, okay, guys, we got a challenge here. How do we fix this? How do we fix this? And we become more solution focused. And when we become more solution focused instead of trying to blame others and, react in an accusatory way, man, you become a more trusted team member. And, I've said things to people, they've messed up sometimes. I'll just say, hey, if that's the worst thing that happens today, it's going to be a good day. Letting people know, hey, we're going to make mistakes, but we got to put it in perspective. I was really frustrated the other day with something that happened, and I was sitting there in my car just thinking, processing just all that went on. And then all of a sudden I saw this guy, somebody had helped him get out of a car, and he looked like he was younger than I was, a young man, and his legs were amputated just like from right above the knees. He just had like his thighs from above, lost his knees below, and man, it just really grieved me for this young man. He had a smile and a sweet spirit. And I say young man, I'm guessing he's around 40, early 40s, so I don't know what happened, but somebody, I don't know if it was a sister, could have been wife, I'm not sure, from where I was sitting in my car just processing something before I went into a meeting. But it just hit me all of a sudden in my spirit that, yeah, I'm dealing with some frustrating things in my life right now, professionally and personally, but everybody's got stuff. And yet, you know what, man, I got 2 legs and I got all 10 toes and I've got all 10 fingers, and I have eyes to see and ears to hear, and I can taste, touch, and smell. I mean, I've been blessed with such a healthy body, even though I have minor aches and pains and things at the age of 61. But compared to this poor guy that, basically, was in a wheelchair, could not walk, lost his legs from right just above, right around the kneecap area. I thought, man, I'm doing really, really good. It was a great perspective reality and really helped me change how I viewed the rest of my day. And I just got to encourage some of you, man, you need to take a look at that too, because sometimes things happen and we don't understand the bigger picture, The most important thing in communication is hearing, what isn't said. And here's one of the things I've learned. I completed coursework on a master's in organizational communication at Western Kentucky University several years ago, and this thing blew me away. I couldn't believe this when I learned this. Nonverbal is 80% of communication. Nonverbal communication. The way your facial expressions are, the way you carry yourself. Nonverbal speaks louder than your words when you're reacting. So keep that in mind today, friends, because we want to attract as many people to Jesus as possible. If you've been blessed by this program, hope you share it with somebody else. My name's Greg Horn, and you've been listening to Hope is Here.